AI has already caused a cheating epidemic at our universities, encouraged us to add glue to our pizza and eat rocks, and written a song about a polar bear.
I'm just a polar bear.
When used in the right way, it can help us do things that were previously impossible. But the technology behind it is being misused right now, and companies are opening up a Pandora's box without realizing the consequences behind their actions. Now AI is coming for Eurovision too, and the same is true for creative industries everywhere. We need to act fast to protect the authenticity of music everywhere and to protect the integrity of the contest. We have good reason to be talking about this now, because in the last few weeks, the Junior Eurovision Song Contest took place and for the first time used AI at a wide scale. The ethical lessons that can be learned from this apply everywhere, but because Junior Eurovision just happened, I'm going to use that as our case study in this video to show you what the problems are. We're going to start by going through all the ways in which AI was used questionably at Junior Eurovision this year, ranging from the slightly bizarre all the way through to the ethically extremely questionable. Before we do, very quickly, if you enjoy the video, please make sure to like it. You can subscribe to the channel as well. Mine and my editor Jay's socials are in the description, where you can also find our Discord server, and you can also support us financially on Patreon. The link is in the description for that too. Finally, I want to say that there is a written version of a lot of the findings in this video in more depth, which has been written by my friend James Stevenson over at Eurovoix. I'll leave a link in the description for that too, in case you want to review that at the end of this video. With that, brace yourself, because things are about to get odd. The main use of AI in Junior Eurovision this year was in the postcards that play before each performance. For those of you who aren't familiar with Eurovision, this is a roughly 45 seconds to 1 minute long segment in which there is an introduction of some sort to the artist, to the song, and potentially to the country in which the contest is being held. What this generally means is artists doing some kind of activity somewhere, combined with some shots that have been approved by the country and city hosting's tourist board. Whether the budget wasn't there this year or the production team simply decided to take a big shortcut, those were more than a little odd this time around. During those postcards, real-life footage of the participants, all of whom are children between the age of 9 and 14, was interspersed with AI-generated likenesses of those children in various contexts. These varied from fairly generic AI slop all the way through to some pretty serious ethical problems. This gave us a lot of the kind of crap that you'd expect, so let's go through some of it now. We're going to start with the least bad, and we're going to work our way up to the very worst. We should say as well that some of these mistakes they attempted to clear up after the dress rehearsal, but the majority of these were not picked up and ended up going out to a broadcast audience of millions. Firstly, as far as shoddy visuals were concerned, you have this participant depicted as an astronaut with only 4 fingers, the same happening to this guy flashing a peace sign, and the Albanian singer going out of shot while simultaneously emerging melted onto the plinth behind her. They failed to correctly depict someone playing the drums, not once, but twice, which gave us those bizarre clips. And this Dutch singer transforms into a girl midway through the postcard. They corrected this in the live broadcast by simply superimposing real life footage on top of the AI generated footage, but it didn't fully obscure it, so you got this bizarre thing instead. If this was the extent of it, then maybe this video tone would be a little different and I could maybe have a laugh at it. Unfortunately, it isn't. A number of participants had their skin tones, body shapes, and hair colors altered. A few examples of which are gonna be on screen now. Hopefully, I don't need to explain why altering children's body shapes to make them thinner, blonder, and whiter is not a good idea. Even worse than this was the examples of these children who, I remind you, are under the age of 14, in some cases having their bodies altered to look more mature than they actually are. The worst example of this is here, where the Irish participant is depicted with what is very clearly an adult's body. Also, why is her head inflated to about double its original size? I mean, seriously, I don't know who looked at this, signed it off and said, yeah, this is a great idea. AI was also used to generate some of the graphics which appeared on the screens behind the performers. For the most part, this just produced inoffensive slop, but in one case, it produced a particularly unfortunate result. During Estonia's performance, this background appeared. They clearly trained their AI on a dataset that includes pictures of New York from before 2001, because that building back there is very clearly the World Trade Center. All of these things came together to produce a show that distracted from these performances rather than celebrating the achievements of these young people. I felt genuinely uncomfortable watching this, and I was far from the only one. Rather than being able to focus on the performances, I felt myself looking forward with dread to the next postcard to see what AI-based monstrosity I was about to encounter. It was like they were actively going out of their way to make sure every AI creative choice they made actively made the show even worse. You could not have a better advert for why AI is terribly misapplied in this kind of context. And it's being used by people who don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. This year, Junior Eurovision was held in Spain, and the host broadcaster was RTVE. This is not a broadcaster that should have budgetary issues. And the head of the production for that broadcaster, when discussing the use of AI, made it clear that that wasn't why they did it. She claimed that the decision to use AI at the contest was made by the show's artistic direction team. This was because, and this was apparent during the live show to absolutely nobody, the theme of the show was young people and their digital environment. The quiet part of that waffle is that the organizers thought it would just be a good idea to use AI, and they had approval from the contest's reference board, which is its highest decision-making body, to do just that. A truly genius idea for a contest that hasn't been embroiled in any controversy this year whatsoever. Initially, I wanted to make this video straight after the contest, but we decided that it would be a better idea to wait for a week in order to create time for us to put questions to the European Broadcasting Union about some of the AI elements that we didn't know the process behind. We also wanted to address some of the wider ethical issues, all of which we will discuss here. Having submitted our questions through the proper press channels, we have received no response. This is despite the fact that the European Broadcasting Union have been much more forthcoming, giving comment to us before on other issues. They did, however, provide a comment to another Eurovision journalist, Matthew Joyce. That came in the form of this statement. Throughout their history, the Eurovision live events have always been at the forefront of using new technology to create exciting experiences for viewers. To create the AI imagery seen in the postcards for this year's event, pictures of the artists were shared by delegations and were then stored locally on the machines of the company commissioned to make them, and never in a cloud. All the data developed to train the AI models was also done locally using software called Stable Diffusion. Therefore, no data created from training the models on the artist faces was placed in a cloud either. Animations were then created on local machines in software called Runway by using the avatars created in Stable Diffusion. All relevant data protection laws were adhered to, and all data will be deleted from the individual machines that were used to create the animation now the project is over. The safeguarding of all those participating in the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, whether on-site or online, is our top priority. So essentially what they're saying here is they created AI likenesses with Stable Diffusion and then animated them using Runway, and that they did all of this offline. Unfortunately, there is a massive gaping hole in this narrative. We found that during one of those postcards I mentioned earlier, you can literally see a watermark in the top right corner, that logo there for Luma, a completely different AI software that is not mentioned in the statement. Luma is an exclusively cloud-based service, and regardless of whether you're using the free or paid version of the program, the terms of use grant Luma irrevocable permission to use user inputs to create, test, improve, train, or otherwise develop the artificial intelligence or machine learning models. The claim from the EBU that the children's likenesses were not uploaded to any cloud and logically therefore not used to train any other AI model outside of the context of the show is in direct contradiction to what we know to be true based on the fact that the creative team did such a shoddy job that they left a watermark in. I do suspect here, in defense, bizarrely, of the European Broadcasting Union, that they are taking an explanation given to them by the creative team in good faith. But they are clearly not being told the full truth. And given that we're dealing with minors here, it is really important that we see full transparency. In a way, I'm being soft on them in this section because I haven't even talked about the fact that Runway has been cloud only for more than a year. Maybe they're using a proprietary version of it. Maybe they're using an old version that can still run locally. But the up-to-date version cannot do this. We know that the idea to use AI, as stated by the Spanish broadcaster themselves, came from the creative direction team. We also know that that broadcaster and the European Broadcasting Union approved its use. Given that meant everyone was aware of this in advance, that meant they should have had the time to consider the ethical implications of its use. To that end, we asked the EBU whether explicit permission had been sought from the parents and guardians of these children for their children's image and likeness to be processed and used to train AI models. As with the rest of our queries, we received no response. The statement that we just looked at also does not address the concerns relating to the altering of the appearance of the children in the postcards. Instead, simply leaving it with the blanket statement of the safeguarding of all of those participating in the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, whether on-site or online, is our top priority. I genuinely don't doubt that is true, but there are serious concerns here that the organizers of the show simply don't understand the ethical implications of using this technology in this way with children. This is reflected in the fact that none of the delegations representing any of the participating countries, nor anyone responsible for the care of these children, had the opportunity to review the postcards in the advance of the final dress rehearsal. That only takes place the day before the live TV broadcast. That means at that point, it's far too late to make any kind of substantive changes. We have had sources within those delegations confirm to us that they made a raft of complaints about the postcards, as well as a number of other issues to do with the production. Because of the shortage of time between the dress rehearsal and the live show, many of these issues were simply not dealt with. And those that were got sticking plaster solutions, like we saw with the superimposition of the boy over the girl that he had turned into in the AI section of his postcard. To put the icing on the cake here, the creative studio that did the AI work for this production ripped off their own prop from a German artist's tour a few weeks before the contest and reused it here during the opening act. AI is incapable of being truly original anyway, because it simply produces pastiches of whatever has been put into it. But the fact that the outputted slop was ripped off from their own project is absolutely priceless. All of this paints a picture of a show that, despite months of lead-in time, was chaotic right up to the last moment. Meanwhile, these postcards seem to be some kind of AI-based Schrodinger's cat of shoddy workmanship. They're both full of AI corner cutting to save time, and clearly extremely late, given the fact that no one got to review them before the day of the show. It's really obvious when you look at some of this that there was no quality control done whatsoever. In addition, since they had actual footage of the artists in the postcards, the use of AI was totally redundant. They didn't need to do it. We have had a pretty tough year in the Eurovision world already. Everyone knows that Eurovision 2024 in Malmö was full of controversy, whether that be related to the participation of Israel or the disqualification of Joost Klein or anything else. The last thing we need is more controversy, especially when it stems from a kids show. But if it transpires that these postcards were made in such a way that has led to the likenesses of children being uploaded and processed by AI models without their permission, especially with something like Luma that will then become publicly available, that is just as big an ethical nightmare as the other problems that we've faced this year. Simultaneously, while they couldn't do anything about their shoddy postcards, there was one thing they made sure to fix. During that jury show, there was a piece to camera by the executive supervisor of the contest, Martin Österdahl. Once again, he was booed.
Honor to the Junior Eurovision Song Contest Executive Supervisor, Martin.
Bueno, ¿esta hombre dónde está?
They then took that segment out of the live show, which was probably a good idea. To be honest, I've not really known whether to laugh or cry about all of this in the now fortnight since the show, in which time I've been writing and filming this. That said, this serves as a great example as to the massive danger of AI, not just in Eurovision, but in creative industries more widely. For every creative job that you automate away by using AI instead, you further decimate an industry that has already been devastated in recent years. I would love for the creative team of Junior Eurovision to take some time to explain to me what exactly it was with AI that a human being couldn't have created to a much higher standard in the same time frame. Because if you wanted to digitize or animate the participants, that in itself wouldn't have been a concern, and there have been people who you can hire to do that for decades now. As an added bonus, the human being in question wouldn't feed the likenesses of the children into a faceless model that will now Frankenstein out endless iterations of them to anyone who asks. Secondly is the lack of disclosure, because as a viewer, if these things weren't being pointed out to you, you would miss a lot of them. On social media now, there are options on most platforms to disclose if the image or video that you're posting has been generated with the assistance of artificial intelligence. There is absolutely no reason why that declaration should not have been made on screen at the start of the postcards and at the start of performances that used it. As an absolute bare minimum, all creative work that uses AI in any way must declare it and detail every single way in which it was used. This is especially critical when you're working with children. Requests for accountability and clarity and further details on this point shouldn't be met by silence or by evasive responses that don't address the core question. At its core, all forms of art are about expression. Expression about emotion and politics and every element of the human experience. AI can produce a pastiche of these things, and it can look quite impressive while it does it. But ultimately, these pastiches will always be empty and soulless. They are, by their very nature, cold and inhuman, and they run totally contrary to why we make art in the first place. They consume vast quantities of other people's self-expression, often without the consent of those involved, and they twist it into a cheap, warped reflection with absolutely zero value whatsoever. There is a reason why the use of AI in creative contexts elicits such a strong negative response from so many people. Artists rightly see this as a perversion of the craft that they have spent their lives mastering, only to face the threat of being undercut by low-quality slop that is built largely on involuntary or surreptitious use of their own work. An uncharitable interpretation of the way in which AI models process people's data without their permission would have justification in just calling it theft. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that creative expression as we know it is at stake over the next few years. Institutions that provide platforms for expression, like the Eurovision Song Contest, have a duty to protect it. What makes this so frustrating for me is that the Deputy Director General of the European Broadcasting Union is on record agreeing with me. In an interview with Bloomberg, he said, "What if at the Eurovision Song Contest we suddenly get an AI-created song? The EBU is reflecting on how do we need this in the rulebook, that the creativity should come from humans and not from machines." That's the message I'd like to close on. I'd also like to speak directly to the EBU while I do it. I agree with you that the Eurovision Song Contest is a competition that, in your words, should reward people on stage who have achieved something in writing a song and performing a song. More widely, creative spaces should reward people who create great creative work. Eurovision has the opportunity to be a leader on these values by taking action now to restrict the use of AI in the contest. Where it is permitted, strict transparency rules should apply. That transparency also needs to extend to when questions are justifiably raised. The evasive and scrutiny-averse approach that the EBU is taking to the media at the moment has to stop. We are fighting for one small corner of the creative world, but I really hope that you will follow through on the sentiment that you yourself expressed just 1 year ago and send a clear message that this contest is first and foremost a space for the celebration of artists and music, and it must always remain that way. I really hope that message gets through, and I hope that the EBU does something about this fast, because I can see this becoming a massive problem in the contest in the not so distant future. I genuinely think that this will be a theme that we have to revisit in the future though. If we start seeing AI generated songs in national selections at a wide scale this year, this will absolutely be a topic that we revisit in a few months. For now, I want to say thank you again for all your support over the last few weeks. I really appreciate all of your comments, all of your likes, and all of the subscriptions. We hit 20,000 subscribers between the last video and this one. And for now, take care, and I'll see you in 7 days.